one of the problems was New York State did not recognize any of my training. So, like one of the things I had done when I was in the Marine Corps is I become uh, an instructor through the NRA.
Right.
Now, if I had been a civilian law enforcement officer and I retired, the NRA would allow me to keep my certificates and keep training.
Oh,
But as a
okay.
Marine, I lost that.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's
So,
so uncalled for.
and I'm like, what you know, this is BS. And so, if I wanted to be law enforcement in New York State, I would, I don't mind having to go to an academy and learning the rules and regulations, laws and procedures of New York State because they're going to be different than what I did
Right.
in the Marine Corps. But to start from zero, and like
Yeah.
you said, biology 101, no, this is ridiculous.
Hello, folks. I'm Glenn, aka Nurse Dad, former Navy hospital corpsman and current ER nurse. And welcome to my channel. And welcome to this episode in particular where I get to interview Gunny Claus. Gunny's real name is Robert, and he served in the United States Marine Corps for 21 years, from 1986 to 2007. He's been a military policeman, a criminal investigator, he's trained recruits, and he's deployed to Iraq. And that's just the skinny. I first met Gunny Claus in New York's Comic-Con last year, and ever since I met him, I knew I wanted to have him on the podcast, pick his brain, and I finally got to. Gunny has spent his retirement years participating in a plethora of charitable events and spreading joy throughout the world. I appreciate Gunny's message of duty, sacrifice, and always trying to find a solution to every problem. Personally, I was just happy to have a virtual call with a Marine. It's been a while. For those watching, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment if possible. Helps the channel out. It lets the algorithm know that Nurse Dad is worth promoting, and it helps me get these stories out to people who might need them. So without further ado, let's kick this pig.
All right. I'm not ready for live podcasts, I'll tell you that much.
Well, you're doing good so far.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, thank you, Gunny Claus, for joining my podcast. I met you at Comic-Con some time ago.
Yep, had a great time at Comic-Con.
Very surprised at the time to see a Marine having his own table. Yeah,
Yeah,
you've got
well,
a bunch of comic book artists and comic books and merchandise, and then there's this Marine in his signature Gunny Claus outfit, his uniform. Uh,
yeah. Well, I
that
mean,
was
it worked out. I was actually there. I gotten a ticket through a friend who does this Saratoga Comic Con, and I was there supposed to help him with his booth, and a buddy of his didn't show up and couldn't show up, and he had already paid
okay.
for the booth, and so through my friend, I contacted him. I said, "Hey, do you mind if I set up Gunny Claus there?" And he's like, "No, go ahead." I go, "Do you want anything for it? Do you need anything for it?" And he's like, "No, I'm good." I'm like, "Okay, great." So that's how I got the booth.
How many days were you set up there?
I was there all 4 days, but I was only really set up for the three because the going back and forth, finding out if this gentleman was going to be able to attend the Comic Con or even if I could get the booth or not.
To talk to you was great, but very quickly I got a sense of just how passionate you are with the charitable things that you do, like Toys for Tots.
Yeah. When I first moved home from when I retired in San Diego and I moved back to New York to be with my family, uh, I was trying to figure out the best way to reintegrate into the community. You look at a lot of things that veterans do. A lot of veterans will open up a distillery or a brewery, or
Mhm.
they'll get into selling T-shirts or coffee. And I'm like, yeah, those aren't anything that I'm really interested in doing. So I looked for charities that I could help. One right around the corner from me is the Ronald McDonald House, which also has a Marine
Right.
connection. One of the founders of that was a Marine.
Okay.
Habitat for Humanity was another one that I volunteered at. I got a little bit of a strange vibe when I went in there because they asked me for a timesheet, and I was like, a timesheet? What are you talking about? And the woman looks at me and goes, "Aren't you here to do community service by a court order?" And
Oh,
I'm like, "No, I just wanted to help out." And she's like, "Oh, sorry," And I'm like, maybe I should have a time sheet, if you think I'm, going to get into trouble or something. And then the Marine Corps Reserve Unit here, Fox 225, I talked to them and I, got in contact with the gunny that was there in charge of the Toys for Tots program. And they really didn't need too much help. And so, I really didn't do too much.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, the unit was moved out of New York. And the gunny contacted me and said, "Hey, we need you to come and help out, get in uniform." And I was like, "Yeah, I can help out, but you don't want me in uniform." And I may have said this to you at the Comic-Con. I was law enforcement in the Marine Corps. I was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. And so it was, going to be knife hands and handcuffs. And I was going to scare all the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's like, "Oh, it can't be that bad." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it's, I really wasn't a happy-go-lucky kind of guy." And so I did an event with them. It was 2 days. We were handing out toys. And I, no joke, scared the kids for 2 days. They would run away from me when I showed up.
You have the beard
And
at the time?
no beard. My hair was
All
probably
right.
about the length it is now. It was a
Okay.
little bit darker, but I was just in regular clothes. I was like, this isn't going to work. I'm still scaring the kids, even though I'm trying not to, and I'm not in uniform. And so I talked to a friend of mine online through social media. They introduced me to the original Gunny Claus online on Facebook, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh man, that'd be great. I could do that." But the uniform belongs to the Drum and Bugle Corps for the Commandant, and it's like I was never in the unit. I'm never going to get it. And they're
Yeah.
like, "Well, I'll just give you mine." And
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, I was." They were a trumpet player in the Drum and Bugle Corps, and I'm like, "Oh, great!" And so lo and behold, I become Gunny Claus, and I'm having fun every day now.
It brings awareness to who you are and to your history. And you have a very uh, robust history with the Marine Corps. You served from, I believe, 1986 to 2007, right? 21 years.
21 years. Yep.
You retired, you were military police, you were a criminal investigator, and you also went back and you taught as an instructor, military Marines who wanted to become military police, right?
And I was also a drill instructor. So
Yeah, the
I,
drill
I,
instructor.
I
All right,
am
yes.
authorized to wear the campaign cover.
We've been to some of the same places. I mean, you did 21 years, make no mistake about it. I joined at 28. I did 5 years active and then 2 in the reserves. Very different careers. I was a Navy hospital corpsman. 3 out of 4 of my commands were Marine commands. I remember a Marine sergeant telling me, uh, he's like, "There's 3 people you don't mess with, Doc, as a Marine. You don't mess with the doc, you don't mess with the cookie, and you don't mess with the MP." So
Yep.
you and I occupied 2 of those 3 occupations. But it was nice hearing you talk. Oceanside, Camp Pendleton, warm place in my heart, in that whole area. But I wanted to ask you, you were an orphan.
Right.
From how did that shape you?
Hello, folks. I hope you're enjoying the interview. Before we go back, let me announce I wrote a children's book, Isabel Learns to Share, a love letter from me to my firstborn daughter, Isabel. It's available on Amazon, but let me be clear. In a world of AI, this book is written by me, every word of it. Everything this book earns goes right to the podcast. This book emphasizes family values, respects parents, and respects children as they go through life making mistakes, but ultimately learning how to become their best selves. Click the link down below, support the podcast, and get yourself a copy. Thank you very much.
You were with the family. You obviously knew that you were an orphan. I would imagine this kind of created like a duplicitous way of living where, you're where you belong, but you're from somewhere else. Did you grow up that way? Like did you feel like you fully belonged? What does that do to somebody?
It affects everybody differently. One of the strange things that I found is that several of my friends um, were also adopted, you know,
Oh,
and so I was like, I think back on it and I'm like, well, that's pretty strange. You know, it's not something that you introduce yourself as off as first thing you say to somebody is
You
you're
didn't
adopted.
lead with that. That just happened to happen.
It just happened to happen.
Just happened to
Um,
happen. Yeah.
and so then, being adopted by the family that I was with, they were both doctors, and so I learned a little bit about medicine. And
Mm,
whenever I talk to anybody who's in the medical field, I always joke I know enough about medicine to be dangerous.
yeah.
And so I understood the difference between nature and nurture. And so some of the things that are in my life that I did, uh, I can see because of the influence of the family that raised me. And then there's other things that I do that, having found my biological mother and her children, uh, there are certain things in my life that were in my nature. So I
Mm,
have a younger half brother who was in the Air Force. Um, Both of her husbands were Navy. Her father was in the Army
wow.
Air Corps during World War II. So the military was a strong side of my nature. Um, then my nurture, my father, my mother, having been from Europe, the family from Denmark and Sweden. Um, I didn't play baseball or football. I played soccer uh, because that was more of a thing that my family there would have been more interested in doing. But then I find my biological family, and I find out that my siblings all played soccer also. So it's where did that come from? Was that actually my
Yeah.
nature or was that my nurture?
It's like those twin stories where the twins don't know
Yes,
each other. And it's like their
yes.
wives have the same names and they chose the same career paths and they're that is yeah, and there's a lot about that. We just don't know is just
As a
how
kid, I was very aware of it. Um, uh, I joked that I was a cuckoo bird. If you know uh, the cuckoo bird, it's not just in a clock; it's an actual bird,
yeah.
and they will lay their eggs in the nest of another bird.
Oh, I didn't
The
know that.
the cuckoo bird egg has a shorter gestation period, and so it uh, breaks out first, hatches first, and then gets rid of what other eggs are in there. So it's the only bird in the nest that family then takes care of. And so,
That's crazy.
yeah, it is. And, so it's things that you think about, or at least I thought about, growing up as a kid, being adopted and not knowing my family at the time. And now, having found my family, a lot of that's explained.
You were growing up, like, and again, I'm referring to another video that I saw you in. It seemed like you were sort of a rebel growing up. Would you say, like not exactly a rule follower? This is one of the things I learned because I got in at 28, so I was already edging toward 30, and I guess I had misconceptions about just what military people were like. And when I joined late, one of my concerns was I was somebody who didn't follow rules very easily. But I was stunned when I actually enlisted and I started meeting people, just how many people were like that. And it wasn't so much that they weren't people who could follow rules. They were young men who were looking for rules worth following. And
Yeah.
looking for something greater than themselves and looking for something that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff within the military doesn't make sense or you don't agree with it. But overall, everything, and we'll limit to the Marine Corps, uh, everything serves a purpose. Everything is geared towards strength. Everything is designed to protect you. And I think most Marines, military personnel in general, will surrender to that because that's exactly something that they feel is worth following. The military, from my experience, actually builds up your individuality, no question, but just teaches you when to put it on the shelf for the greater good. And I think it says something positive about most people in general. Like they're not wayward. They're not, it's not that they can't follow anything or don't have the focus. It's just that they're looking for something worth following, worth believing in. And I was really stunned to meet so many people who they tell you about their backgrounds, and it's like, I'm like, how do you wind up here? People who are, they're getting promoted, they're doing the right thing, they sacrifice themselves, but man, like between the age of maybe 20 and 24 or 16 and to 20 or whatever age they were when they were becoming young men and weren't enlisted at that time, they were just doing whatever they wanted. They weren't following any rules. That was stunning to me, to meet people like that.
Yeah, I think Adam Driver says it the best in one of his interviews. He was a misfit, and he was looking, to
Mhm.
find someplace to fit in, and regular society wasn't it. And he found that niche in the Marine Corps.
Mhm. It's ironic too. It really is. It's just that somebody who could not be told anything as a civilian, enlisting in the Marine Corps and just totally giving themselves to it.
When I joined the Marine Corps, we all have to take the ASVAB, and we all have
Yeah.
to, figure out what tests that through that test, what MOSs were going to be offered, what jobs were going to be offered in whatever branches. And, I scored rather well. So I talked to the other branches, the Navy, they saw my scores, and so they offered me to run the nukes.
Yeah.
And
Which
I'm
means
like,
you scored pretty damn high.
yeah, I'm
Let's not
smart.
be too humble. That's like you probably scored higher than nearly anybody to be offered a nuke position or nuke
And
track.
I'm smart, but the thing is, I also know I'm not that smart. And so as the recruiter's talking to me, he goes, "Yeah, you can run nukes," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to live in a submarine." It's not that I don't mind being in a submarine in an enclosed space. It's just that I'm tall, and I don't want to be bending over all the time. I don't want to be able to not fit in a rack, you know, all these
Mhm.
things. And the recruiter's like, "Oh, but we have three." At the time, we had three aircraft carriers that were nukes, and I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm not going to graduate one, two, or three in my class,
Right.
so I'm going to be stuck in a submarine." And he's
Right.
just like, "Okay, you're smart and you've got common sense."
Right.
And so, I got done talking to him. I went over to the Army side, and the Army has a program where if you got the good scores, you can become a helicopter pilot through the warrant officer program. And because I had been
And
interested,
they offer you a warrant officer track, huh? Like that's
yeah,
big. That's a
yep.
big deal.
And having been interested in the military, I knew that at the time to be a pilot, especially in a helicopter, I had to be right eye dominant because
Yeah.
the scope that you use to see everything goes over
Hmm.
your left eye. And if you're left eye dominant, that's what you see, and you don't see the ground, and bad things can happen. And I knew that I was left eye dominant, and that wasn't going to be an option for me. And the recruiter didn't even know that. And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, dude, I'm going to see you later." I don't remember what the Air Force offered. Back then, the Coast Guard was Department of Transportation, and the
Yeah.
Space Force didn't exist yet.
Not existent, right? Yeah.
Went over to the Marine side, talked to the recruiter there. They basically said, whatever job you want to have, you can have. And at the time, I thought that I would join the Marines, get some training in law enforcement, and get out and be a state trooper or local police officer.
Yeah, which is so smart to do that.
Yep.
I knew I was going to become a nurse. It kind of occurred to me later in life, obviously, like 27, 28. And so corpsman made sense. My dad was in the Air Force for an enlistment. I actually went to be a Air Force corpsman, and I was 27 and going on 28, and you couldn't be over 27 to enlist in the Air Force. But that it turned out to be like the greatest thing because I totally loved becoming a Navy hospital corpsman. But I remember around week 9 or 10 in boot camp, this senior chief came in and he called all the corpsmen over and he sat with us. And this is 2009, and he says to us, don't let this Navy shit get in your head. You're a corpsman. You're going with the Marine Corps. So, and you know, I graduated boot camp. I went to A school, learned how to become basics on becoming a corpsman. I think I scored like seventh or eighth in my class, so I had the last orders for California. I didn't even care what it was. I think it said Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, right? I didn't know anything, but it turned out to be the School of Infantry. So when they picked me up, they were like, "Well, you're coming from A school. You never went to field medical training. Like you're not even certified to be in the field." And I was like, I guess I should go to the hospital, right? And they're like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
We need field corpsmen, so we'll take you and we'll get you in field medical training and we'll get you in the field. And at the time, I'm like, I had no idea what any of that really means. I was very naive. But but during A school, I had HM2 Roddy. He had deployed several times with the Marines. He was a Casevac corpsman in Iraq. Um, he was a big influence. He was like Greenside corpsman all the way, and I wanted to be very much like him. So I kind of gave myself into it, and it was just amazing. I did like 60 something days at the clinic there in Camp Pendleton, and went to field medical training for 2 months. And when I got back, I was able to be a field corpsman, for the School of Infantry West, which was really unique. Because I was with Infantry Training Battalion and Advanced Infantry Training, where for those who might be watching that don't understand, boot camp basically teaches you how to go, yes, sir, ma'am. Teaches you the ranks, teaches you how to walk and talk like you're in the military. But the School of Infantry is where you learn how to, learn the basics of your combat skills. Or for those who aren't infantrymen, who are going to go on, they have MCT, which is military combat training, which again, every Marine a rifleman, so they're going to make sure everyone's a rifleman when they leave and before they go off to whatever else they're going to train for. And I mean, it was just I pretty much shot every weapon in the Marine Corps. I mean, you had certain weeks where, sure, you're doing a 5K on a Monday and a 20K on a Wednesday and a 15K on a Thursday for different companies, but then you're doing the 50 cals, you're doing the grenade range, and you're doing it from not instructor status, but you're with the instructors. So there's like 30, 40 grenades left. No one's on a Friday, people want to go home early. They're not going to wait for these things to be collected. It could be several hours. They want to go home. So it's like, hey, Doc, you want to learn how to throw a grenade? We got 40 of them we need to get rid of. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And
Yeah, my first duty station, um, I requested overseas from
uh,
my MOS school, my MOS training, and I went to 3rd FSG. It's now 3rd MLG on Okinawa. And our battalion, once a week, would send Marines up to Camp Hansen, where the infantry was, to learn how to fire all the heavy weapons and
yeah,
crew served weapons, and, like you said, throw hand grenades and everything.
yeah, fire
And
small all that. It was amazing.
and and so, instead of sitting back, on Camp Kinzer, cleaning or, you know, PMing a vehicle or whatever, I always volunteered to go up for the training. And, the grunts up there, was one of the companies got tasked with doing the training. They were looking at us, like, what are these pogues doing here? They're worthless. But every week they'd see me, and, finally they're like, dude, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I can sit back, down in Kinzer and do nothing, or I can come up here and learn what I'm supposed to know.
Yeah.
And so, back then, it was the old M60 machine gun, and everybody
Right.
else is firing it from the tripod and a T&E, and I've got the old 60, and I'm a big guy, so I'm holding it, and I'm shooting it from the hip, and I'm shooting it from
Mhm.
the shoulder, and I'm getting to move and do things that nobody else can do. And everybody's like, why does he get to do that? And they're like, he's been here 6 weeks in a row. You know,
Yeah.
he's got more time behind the trigger than a lot of gunners got.
Nurse Dad here. For you college students or novice nurses, I want to let you know that in the description below, there is a link for 2 free Nurse Dad guides. The first guide I designed for college students on how to better optimize your time so you could do the things that you want to do in life, but still try to go for that A. The second guide is for nurses specifically based on my life experiences as an ER nurse and in the military. Just a few tricks on how to multitask and not burn out in patient care. So whether for you or for someone you know, I hope you find these guides helpful. Thank you very much. Nurse Dad out.
The School of Infantry West, it's like, they're obviously exuding to the young Marines just the purest form of Marines. Like you're teaching them the absolute highest standard of what they expect them to function as. So especially when it's your first duty station as a corpsman, you're witnessing this. You're working with the sergeants. I want to say sergeant, but people who aren't people may not understand that's how we pronounce it, but well, they might be like, "What does he know how to say sergeant?" But I'll never say Sarge. Never call him a Marine sergeant Sarge. We know that. I learned that once going to Camp Pendleton. Also going to a Marine chow hall in my PT gear. That just doesn't fly. No. Uh, but you're seeing the highest absolute standard, and at one point in 2010, with the way the Afghan and Iraq were going, they were estimating that 4 people for every training company were not going to make it. So it became like the leadership were like, don't just go there and patch up boo-boos or do triage, because it's very important to know who has pneumonia versus a URI, because pneumonia needs to go back to the clinic and they need antibiotics because they can infect the whole company, and a URI you could treat in the field, and to know exactly, hey, does someone have a stress fracture? You need to know this or it can get worse. And it was really important, and you really had to learn your skills well, because the worst thing to do is take a Marine out of training. And so you really had to understand triage and really keeping people healthy in the field, and keeping them getting their medication if they need it, or repacking that cellulitis in the field and keeping it clean, and responding to heat stroke or heat exhaustion, all that stuff. But sorry, my table's moving. But at the same time, I took it upon myself to, there's corpsman aid, there's buddy aid, and there's self aid. Let's make these young Marines as able as they can to take care of themselves, to take care of their fellow Marine. And when I was in infantry training battalion, ITB, that was something I took very seriously. Young Marines, they come for you for everything, and seasoned Marines, they don't come to you at all. So it was that battle with the older Marines, like, hey, let me see this. What's going on here? So
My best one was when I was an instructor at Fort Leonard Wood with the Army for 3 years. They would do an annual hike out in the civilian town with civilians. It was like 2-3 miles. It was the world's slowest pace. It was just dog and pony show.
yeah,
And I got done, and since it was so slow, I was actually hurting because we'd gone so slow. And so I go into the Army, and they have medics; they don't have corpsmen.
right.
And there's this young PFC in the Army standing there, and I go, "Yeah, I need some Motrin." And they're like, oh, "Okay, hold on a second." They get it out, and they look at me, and they're like, "Have you eaten yet?" And I'm like, "No." "Oh, I can't give this to you." And I'm like, "Listen, give me this stupid Motrin. I'll take care of it." Right. And so they open it up and they pop out 200 milligram Motrins. And I
Yeah,
looked
that's
at
not
them
enough.
and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, that's all I can give you without, a prescription from a doctor." And I'm like, "I need 800 milligrams. I'm not, I'm not a trainee. Give me what I need." And all of a sudden, I hear somebody come in the back of the tent, and they come up and they're like, "Hold on a second, let me help out." And the guy looks at me and goes, "Oh, hold on a second, Gunner Sergeant." And he goes in the back and he comes out and he's got a bottle of 800 milligrams,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and he just throws me the bottle. And he's like, "Here you go." And the other guy's like, you
Go
can't do
use it in
that.
one day.
He goes, you can't do that. And he goes, you don't understand. He's a Marine gunnery sergeant, and he eats 800 milligram Motrin, like Tic Tacs.
Yeah. I had a sergeant instructor in a school of infantry, and he was every time we started, because I was attached to Echo Company and more than anybody else, and every time I showed up, he was like, "Doc, I need my 1600." And at first I'm like, you shouldn't have more than 800 at a time, Sergeant. He's like, "Doc, give me my 1600." I was like, "Here you go." I made sure I carried extra Motrin. Uh, yeah. Yeah, man, those are great times. The stories too. To at the time of the School of Infantry in 2010, every instructor was a combat vet. I mean, just because you'd have the young the students just doing their thing and whatever, and you're just hanging back. You're always with somebody, and the stories. I mean, just to and the humor. I mean, nobody can duplicate the marine humor. Just like, obviously the closest thing I ever saw was Full Metal Jacket, in terms of how these instructors can be.
I
But
was I was a student at an Army course, and you know I'm surrounded by soldiers, and we're sitting in the classroom, and we're going through the training cycle, and something comes up, in the PowerPoint, and I say, an offhand remark about it, and everybody just stops and looks at me, and the instructor looks at me, and he's like, "Go see the Marine instructor." Like I'm being sent to see the principal, and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"What did I say?" I don't even know what was wrong. And so I go back there, and I see the Marine instructor, and he's like, says something about the joke I said. He's like, "Hey man, these guys, they got thin skin, they don't understand our
yeah.
humor. Just watch what you're saying." And then he finishes it with, "Oh, I hear you're going out to St. Louis this weekend." And I'm like, "Yeah. Hey, you need to go to this club and this club if you're heading out." I'm like, "Roger that, thanks." And so I go back into class, and lunchtime, we're all sitting there, having lunch, and all the soldiers like, "So what happened? What happened?" And I'm like, "Oh, I got told what strip club to go to in St. Louis." And they're just like, "Huh? You didn't get in trouble?" They're like, "No."
Yeah, I remember a conference we had to do at Camp Pendleton because with the blue side, with the actual Navy hospital side, and uh, all the corpsmen from the Marine side of base. Again, I'm speaking in terms so most people can understand where Camp Pendleton is. It's sort of like halved. You got the Marine side and the Navy side, and but we're on the Navy side, and a lot of the Green Side corpsmen, whether they're from the training command that I'm at or other units, we're at this corpsman course for the day, and it ends with this nice Navy nurse, and she's philosophizing, and she ends it with and remember, at the end of the day, all about saving lives. And there must have been like 7 or 8 greenside corpsmen there, and as soon as she said that, in unison we all said, "Kill." I'm just like, and I just love the culture that comes with it, and just getting down to brass tacks, getting done what needs to get done.
And
It's something you don't. Yeah,
that's one of the
what's
things
it?
I try to keep with the Gunny Claus, is trying to keep some of that humor. I spoke to you at the Comic Con. Some of them translate better than others.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, uh, Stack presence. You know, keeps the Marine idea there.
yeah,
The other one is the Marine Corps in World War II with the Raiders used the term gung ho, which is Chinese for
yeah.
work together, representing Santa Claus
I
and
know that's
Christmas.
what it meant in Chinese, gung ho. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was from the Raiders, Carlson's Raiders.
All
Yep,
right. I didn't know it meant work together.
yep. And so trying to keep that history and that camaraderie and the Marine side with the Gunny Claus, I now say gung ho ho.
Yeah. No, that's I was actually gonna say that as soon as you signed on, but I was like, because I saw that in the video. You had mentioned that in the video that I watched, and one of the things I find remarkable is like I can meet somebody a veteran, and you could become like you just have each other's backs. It just happens like this, and I can't even explain how it's possible. It's like you almost step back. You're like, how is this possible that you can have like a lifelong buddy and you just met each other and there was just suddenly there's like this mixing of histories and experiences and I mean it can happen in a day. You're just boys, and but as a civilian, the amount of work it takes to make friends, to keep those friendships going, uh, the even if they're strong friendships, they might not be like, hey, my house got knocked down from whatever is happening. Can I stay at your place for a few days? That might, no, we're not that good of friends. So it's remarkable and also sad because you leave a duty station. I mean, thank God for social media in terms of that, because you can keep in contact a lot better. But it is kind of disheartening to have been so close to so many people and to just you get out and you don't really see them anymore. Or you're a civilian. You touched it on the video, like people thank you for your service, but they don't really account for your experience on the job. I know as an ER nurse, people get caught up in how busy the day is, and I'm just like, this is nothing. Like this is not stress. Uh,
Yeah.
or somebody is, a charge nurse for the day, and it's like I know I could do the job, but I know I'd also not never be asked for it, as somebody who just does contracts and is sort of in and out. But they it never really. I mean, I got out of the military to go to nursing school, and suddenly I'm in anatomy 101. I had to go through 4 years to get that degree, and much of it was just a waste. And even now as a nurse, as a corpsman, I could crike somebody. I was doing much more advanced triage. I was prescribing certain medications. There was one time, even in Africa, where I was the uh, acting medical officer because the doctor didn't come with us, and I had to coordinate with the doctor at a clinic. He was a Navy doctor who was part of the first wave to go into Iraq, who was in a shock trauma platoon, and only had the fondest memories of Marines because I was deployed with a Marine unit at the time, who who would be my signature guy, whether I needed to order glasses for somebody or to get them medication, like doing me a favor. But then again, as a nurse, like I could never touch some of those responsibilities. And yeah, I'm making more money, but just the level of responsibility or the feeling of purposeful activity is just, I think, way down by comparison. And I can see
It's it's
how,
it's sad
uh,
that
yeah,
um, there and it's not just the training, but it's actually like gatekeeping
uh,
for the people that have higher degrees. They don't want people below them to be that proficient and be able to do things. They
yeah,
want to be in charge, and unfortunately, there are certain jobs in the civilian world, and that you know that degree means everything, and
right,
you know they think that they walk on water basically because they've got this degree,
yes,
and it's like, dude, you know, it's like I said, my parents were doctors. So when I go in and talk to a doctor and they start using medical terms and trying to impress me and convince me that, whatever's in my best interest because they're the doctor, I just look at
mhm,
them and I'm like, no, dude, I'm not doing that. This is what we're doing. And they're like, what do you mean? And I go, because that's BS.
yeah.
And it really annoys me
I'm sure they don't
that,
like that.
that's
They
the
don't
way
hearing
things
that.
are. Yeah.
Uh, on my last shift, there was a physician, great guy, but he's teaching at a conference late in the spring in New York for geared toward first responders to teach, emergency medicine, from tourniquets to all that stuff. And he didn't know I was a corpsman. I started talking about because I've done my fair share of being an instructor in that capacity, and you could tell like right away I just started getting pumped up talking about tourniquet application and how, if you don't have a tourniquet, you are the tourniquet. You put your leg in there, you stop that bleeding, you whip it out. You're not taking a knee, going in your backpack. And I was just getting so passionate about it for like 60 seconds. And I could tell, you could just see like in his eyes, like, wow, this guy is really, really knows what he's talking about. And because, when we learn as a corpsman, and Marines know a lot about medicine, or at least emergency medicine. You have combat lifesavers courses that they take, and most experienced Marines. I mean, I don't think anybody's more proficient in putting on a tourniquet than a Marine, even next to a corpsman. I mean, just like certain things that Marines know how to do to rescue their buddy is just like stellar, but. When we learn it, it's very practical. Like before deployment, I go to Pig Lab to learn what arterial bleeding really feels like, and to see on a it's a sedated pig with a civilian standby and for anyone who has a problem with that, I always say that the pigs used in that Pig Lab had better lives than any pig that you eat on a hot dog bun. I mean, they're sedated, they're fed natural food. They have civilian standbys with military to make sure that everything is absolutely being done humanely. But you're learning these skills, you're going over again, how to crike and how to do this, but you're going to be deployed in 2 weeks. You may have to do this on someone else. When I'm teaching Marines buddy aid and self aid, it's not just for them, because I know that statistically speaking at the time, if you have a Marine in combat who's injured and you stabilize them in the field, they have a 90% survival probability. A corpsman in the field, because they're the corpsman, their survival probability is 55%. So you don't want to be that guy on Saving Private Ryan, Tom Hanks, like, Doc, tell us what to do. You want to make sure everyone's trained, because
Yep.
you might need it eminently. It's a very intimate way to learn how to perform.
So before we deployed, there's it used to be a TV show company called Stu Seagal Productions, and
Okay.
they did a TV show called Renegade, Pensacola, Wings of Gold, uh, um, another police show. I can't remember what it was. Um, it was Silk Stockings, and they saw a need for realistic training. And when I first joined, they'd have a person sitting there with a moulage, it was a piece of rubber sitting on their leg, saying that they had a wound on their leg, or there would be a piece of rubber sitting on their chest, and the little note would say sucking chest wound,
Yeah.
and all these things. And it was so fake that, you couldn't really use the training well. And so this company took it over, and they actually used people from the countries that we were going to go to deploy to be role players for the local inhabitants. They used veterans who had been in combat and lost a limb to
Mhm.
role
Yeah,
play
that's similar.
somebody who was injured and was lost a leg and had an arterial bleed and things like that. And it was so more immersive and so more realistic that the training was 10 times better than when I first joined, compared to the training that they can get now.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, before 2001, from what I heard, because I wasn't obviously I heard that the medical was still in the Vietnam War era in terms of engaging people who needed
Well, I mean,
help.
one of the things that the military did, um, because they were losing that expertise in treating wounds, they were actually sending doctors, military doctors, to hot spots like LA, Chicago, and Miami, so that these doctors would work in a trauma unit specifically on gunshot wounds and stabbings and stuff, so they could see how, important it was to get certain things done quickly. And
Yeah, that was actually a thing at Camp Pendleton. I tried to get to the you could spend like I forgot how long it was, maybe 2 weeks. You can go to like an LA trauma ward
yeah,
to get skills, which is like, anytime you can leave and go somewhere for 2 weeks and stay in a hotel is fabulous. But yeah, that was like a thing like you can to try to apply for and to do.
and one of the things, since I was in law enforcement, I was able to do for my Marines was take them to see an autopsy.
Okay.
And I actually had three of my Marines have to leave during the procedure because they got sick.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, okay, write those names down, because
Yeah.
if something happens and we have to take care of somebody, they may have a problem and they may need to see the chaplain or the psychiatrist when we get back. And then I had one female Marine, she was there helping out the medical examiner, taking out the organs, weighing the organs, and, knee deep in it. And,
Wow.
so she got the first responder kit, the additional training for the medical side, because I knew she could handle it.
Yeah, that's actually I never got to see an actual autopsy. I've seen my fair share of cadavers, but yeah, that would be something. It's always good to have eyes on organs, what they actually look like. It's part of the pig lab where at one point, the pig was kept alive and they took the chest plate off and they showed you what a punctured lung looks like by actually doing it. And that muscle memory is incredible. Like knowing what arterial blood feels like in my hand in the dark and the smell
Yeah.
of it. I mean, it's just such good training. Yeah, it's to see
Yeah.
that.
The first autopsy I went to, that was rough. I mean, we had to use the Vicks vapor rub underneath the nose.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and, as it started, I remembered, there used to be a TV show on called Quincy, and he was a medical examiner, and he starts the autopsy, he starts the procedure, and the scene is all of the students are passing out and leaving the room, and
Yeah,
when he
yeah.
finishes with the autopsy, he's the only one left, and this autopsy is going that way. It was all law enforcement, civilian law enforcement, except for myself as a Marine, and everybody left the examining room because it was that bad. It was that difficult to be there and observe what was going on. And we get done, two medical examiners and myself, and we're walking out, and these guys are talking about what they're going to have for lunch, like
Yeah.
nothing, and I'm sitting there, barely made it through. I'm like, geez, that's the last thing I'm thinking about is food right now.
Yeah, I was in a code and we have this device called a Lucas. It's basically a machine that does CPR. And I don't think it was functioning correctly or whatever reason. I was basically doing CPR with another this guy was a male nursing assistant. And I could do CPR for a long time and still hit the 2.5 inches. And I think a couple of rounds went by. I was still feeling good about it. He's like, Glenn, do you want to switch out? I'm like, this is actually a great tricep workout, which, you know, I mean, things are said. But that's just that's one of the reasons I do like the medical field. That there is, I wouldn't call that humor at the time, but just things are said. It is a job. It is a job. It takes a big toll out of you. But yeah, I was feeling it in my triceps. I was still, as long as I was hitting the 2.5 inches in depth and the care was not compromised, I wanted to keep going a couple more rounds. It was a good exercise, but I mean, that's, some things are said. Sometimes there are a few chuckles even in a code. Everything is being done the way it needs to be done, but people are human. So you're a combat vet. You served in Iraq. I am not a combat vet. I've served in hostile areas where there was, Taliban, and I did one trap mission but I wanted to talk to you because sometimes I feel like sometimes we get caught up in who's a combat vet, who's not a combat vet. One thing the Marine Corps does when they say that they do this, and they really do it. They train like how they fight. And even when I was at Camp Pendleton, there was an instructor who drowned in the pool. There was a helicopter that went down. There was a truck that went off a cliff. A buddy of mine was on the 11th MEU, and he was in Djibouti, Africa, where I actually was 2 years later, doing a live fire drill. Unfortunately, somebody had put a, a reflective uh, something that reflected in the dark. I think it was basically the same color as the targets, and unfortunately, he got shot and killed. It is rigorous. It's a rigorous lifestyle. It's not to be downplayed. There's no combat is its own thing. Obviously, incredible respect to that, but it's not hot and cold. It's not like you're a combat vet, and if you weren't, you were just chilling. Like I always I try to explain people what it's like in terms of being in the Marine Corps. Obviously, I'm doing it from a corpsman point of view. They train really, really hard. It is not an easy lifestyle, and because sometimes especially civilians, and this always
So that's
pisses
the
me
thing,
off. They really try to dismiss did you go to combat? And for me, I don't care, but for other people, especially who worked a lot harder than me, who cannot just dip out like docs like to dip out sometimes, but we're there and in the field, 2 weeks. It could be Camp Pendleton, it could be somewhere else, it could be the 29 Palms, who are training. I mean, I remember we were doing training in Africa, and the first week I lost 10 pounds, and it was rigorous. And I remember because South Sudan at the time was having a civil war, and we were supposed to go all month long. We slept with our weapons, and in the middle of the night, we're being woken up. We're saying that we're going to go. We're going to go. We're going to the airstrip, waiting for transport. Helicopters are on, and we're not going. We're not going. Go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. The next day, training. You go back to where you're staying. You try to get some sleep. Suddenly you're woken up again in the middle of the night. You get your weapon. You're putting on your paint, your face paint. You get your gear. You're waiting again. For the bird. And we're not going. We're not going. It's still a very stressful existence, and still a lot of hard work. I don't think people can really understand what that lifestyle is like.
So in my 20 odd years, I got ready to go to combat several times. One time we're deployed to Korea. We're up by the DMZ, in a little area called Unchan. And, every time the UN forces, the American forces, and South Korean forces would do a training exercise, the North Koreans would do a corresponding training exercise in the North. Well, when they did that, usually it would be the same number of people. So if we had 1,000, they'd have 1,000. If we had 2,000, they'd have 2,000. And it was this sort of understanding, this gentleman's agreement between both sides that's how it would go. Well, we're sitting there and we set up for this bear hunt. And we're there and we're deployed and we've got our 1,000 guys or so. And the intelligence comes back and says, "Hey, wait a minute, they've got 5,000 guys. They're setting up to have more guys than us,"
Mhm.
which intelligence and the higher ups start going, "Wait a minute, that's not normal. They may be preparing to do something."
Right. Right.
And so we're sitting there, and we're a FSG, we're a field support group, or MLG, Marine Logistics Group, and so we've got females in our unit, and this is back in the 80s, and back then females weren't allowed to be in combat, period, at
Right.
all. And so now our command is going, okay, we're going to have to take all these females out of the jobs that they're in right now, and we're going to have to evacuate them to either someplace further south or even all the way back to Okinawa. And I'm sitting there, as a young Marine going, wait a minute, nothing's even happening. I'm going to lose 3 Marines. We're already shorthanded and we're going to lose 3 people. And so, that was one of the things that annoyed me when I was younger. And, you know, these days people talk about equality and who's allowed in the military and who's not allowed in the
Yeah.
military. And, it's like, hey, if somebody wants to do what you and I did, and they want to put their life on the line and they want to serve their country, find them something that they can do. I don't care what
Yeah.
it is. If it's counting paper clips or, moving widgets from one spot to another because they want to serve, let them serve,
Yeah.
because that's what we want. We want people to serve that want to serve. And then later on, I was with Division, and we're sitting there and we're at Camp Pendleton, and Division at Camp Pendleton. There's 3 regiments: First Marines, Fifth Marines, and Seventh Marines, and each one of those regiments rates a platoon of military police. Well, my
Yeah.
company, that's supposed to have 3 platoons, has 1 platoon. So whenever First Marines goes and does any training and they want their MPs, we all go. Fifth Marines does it, we all go. Seventh Marines
Yeah.
does it, we all go. And so at this one time, Seventh Marines were preparing to go into Southwest Asia. I can't remember if it was Iran or Iraq or, wherever. And so we're staging our gear and we're trying to get it ready to go to Iraq, Southwest Asia. And then North Korea starts acting funny. So the Fifth Marines, they're tasked with going there, and they want their platoon. So now we're staging gear to go to the cold weather Korea or the hot weather desert, and we don't know which one we're going to go to. And, both of those units wanted to check our equipment and check us out to make sure that we're ready for this and that. And, it's like we're juggling everything, trying to get everything together. We're sending off our heavy weapons to be checked out by their armorers to make sure that they're combat ready, and one unit comes back and goes, yeah, none of your weapons can go to combat.
Oh, man.
They're all junk. The other unit's like, yeah, these weapons are all good to go. We'll load them up on this. And we're like, okay, great. And we got so far as loading everything up, driving our Humvees out to 29 Palms, and sitting on the runway to be loaded on planes to go. I can't remember if it was Korea or Southwest Asia or wherever, but we're sitting there and we could see off to the side, we could see the ammo techs sitting on a pile of ammunition, ready to break it out and issue it to us, so we could go. And that was the longest day of my life. I mean, you get there at 0 dark 30, and you're sitting out there on the flight line and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting.
Yeah.
And then, it comes down. It's like, oh, go back to Camp Pendleton. We're done.
Yeah. But all of that is stressful, and all of that it takes its toll on you. So to dismiss it as, well, it wasn't combat. Marines train how they fight. They're unique in this. I wrote this down: the War Powers Resolution Act of 1973. So the president basically has 90 days to engage any situation in the world using the military without congressional approval.
Right.
It's the Marine Corps that the president will use.
But that War Powers Act allows the president to use the Marine Corps without congressional approval at any time, anywhere, for any period of time.
Yeah, he doesn't even have to mention it for I think 48 hours or something. Don't quote me on that, but that's what makes the Marine Corps so different. And I'm speaking from at the time as an outsider, right? I joined the Navy, and you get there and you realize, somebody had told me this, some Marine, instructing this boot Navy guy. It changes your mindset when as a Marine, president could say, we're going somewhere. Anything could pop off at any time, and within 72 hours, you're there. You're storming the beach, so to speak. That changes the way you exist. When just the president at any time can just send you, and that's something I sensed very strongly. And it does influence the Navy. Marine Corps is the Department of the Navy. Marines might say the men's department. But in terms of linguistics, in terms of being a hospital corpsman who's going with them, it changes your mentality. Like, Navy hospital corpsmen say "oorah," Navy says "hooyah," we corpsmen say "oorah." What do Marines say? "Oorah." So there's a very strong relationship there, and you just get a sense of that very quickly. Like, we're training for a war that could pop off at any time, and we could be sent to go tomorrow. And I don't think anybody exudes that energy more than a U.S. Marine. I just don't. I don't see that anywhere. It's like you don't have the luxury of knowing that there's going to be a period of time, gear up for battle, that it could just happen at a moment's notice.
So when I was an MP and I was in San Diego at the recruit depot working as an MP, the first Gulf War occurred, and a lot of things were happening. But the thing that was the most amazing thing to me is almost every day we would have a person drive up to the gate saying that they had been in the Marine Corps at whatever time in their life. And, some of these guys were in their 70s now,
Uh,
and they are driving up to the gate because they want to serve again,
right.
and that, you're just like, wow. And I was a young guy. I'm in my 30s, and I'm looking at this guy, and, it looks like he could do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. I've met
okay.
people like that.
I'm like, all right, let's rock and roll.
Yeah.
And you saw me at the Comic Con. I'm still the same weight that I was when I was in. I
Yeah.
may not be as fast as I was. I may not be able to lift as much as I could when I was in, but I'm still ready.
Yeah, I wish I was at the same weight, probably 25 more. I'm trying to lose it, but I'm still I still keep it going. I'm still um well, I actually talked this in my last podcast someone I served with. Sometimes it is you're in fight or flight mode a little too much, right? It's still kind of there. It could be a curse, but it can also be a good thing, and I think we all have to deal with that in our own way. But I do find that for me, the green side, for you, Marine Corps, that it does you retain this umbilical cord to the heart of the country, the soul of the country. I feel, and in everything that you do, God forbid you did something half-assed or something that was less than honorable, and then they found out you were also in the Marine Corps, or you served, for me, a Navy hospital corpsman. Like, it would really affect me. It would really feel like a big blemish if I didn't perform, gives anything 100%, and they found out, like, oh, you were a hospital corpsman, and you kind of look like a shitbag right now. Like, it would affect me in a deep way, and I find that people won't say ex-Marines, but people who were in the Marine Corps, they kept those standards. They keep the standard.
Yeah, the men's and women's Navy basketball from Annapolis was just at West Point,
Yeah,
and I have some followers on social media that are from Annapolis, and I was hoping to see them down at the game, so I decided to wear my uniform uh, down at the event, and it's all Army,
yeah,
but it's the brotherhood is there still. I'm on Army ground. I'm Department of the Navy. I'm a Marine, but I've got football players that want to take a picture with me because they know who I am and what I'm doing.
yeah.
So it's really good.
That's what's great about what you do. As I said before, you bring attention to it. It breaks my heart sometimes. Like, when I was on the GI Bill going to nursing school, I met veterans who they used up their GI Bill. They used it up going from major to major, and they were sort of in this limbo. Uh, Kind of like how I got out, and suddenly I'm in Anatomy 101. Like, literally 101. And I just wanted to say, F off. I hate this. And I find like a lot of veterans, they they had all this responsibility, they acquired this skill, zero translates, and they just get exasperated. And they go back to trying to find like this new proverbial platoon or somewhere to belong, and somewhere that recognizes their skill sets. And in this case, like they burn up their GI Bill trying to figure it out, and then they don't even get the degree that they could have gotten. Or um,
Well, I mean, the thing is the colleges give so little credit for what we actually do.
yeah,
I mean,
or zero.
I, well, I mean, they do give you some, but I mean,
No,
other
they do give
things
you
they
some.
don't. It's like I went to the community college. I was 40 years old. And they're like, you got to take personal finance. I'm like, what are you joking? They're like, yeah, everybody's got to take personal finance. And I'm like, you realize in my last command in the Marine Corps, I was in charge of $1 million of equipment and budget. I
Yeah,
had 100 Marines that worked for me. I've bought 2 houses. I can't count the number of cars and motorcycles and everything else that I've done over the last 20 years. And you want me to take personal finance? And they're like, well, you can do a clep it out. You can do an essay on it. And I'm like, all right, give me a 3x5 card. And they're like, what do you mean? You got to write an essay. And I go, yeah, the essay is going to be United States Marine Corps, 1986 to 2007. Married twice, 2 houses, 2 dogs, so many cars. Here you go. But, they wanted more. And I was just like, this is ludicrous. This is ridiculous that, that's their mentality. But, they're dealing generally with somebody who's just got out of high school and has no life experience,
yeah,
and the system is set up, and it's because of the computers and the way it's set up now, there's no way around it. You
yeah.
have to fill that block. You have to put something in there, and they only have certain things that they can put into that space. And it's like it's that's why, like you said, probably some of these guys are sitting there and they're bouncing from one degree to another because they can't find anything that fits, and anything that
Yeah.
they've done already that they're interested in, they're not getting any credit for.
When you got out, what made you I guess you kind of you didn't want to go into law enforcement in any way? Because I know that's why you part of the reason you became an MP.
Well, one of the problems was New York State did not recognize any of my training.
And you're in Albany, by the way. That's where you reside?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, and even some of the training that I got wasn't recognized anymore. So, like, one of the things I had done when I was in the Marine Corps is I become an instructor through the NRA.
Right.
Now, if I had been a civilian law enforcement officer and I retired, the NRA would allow me to keep my certificates and keep training.
Oh,
But as a
okay.
Marine, I lost that.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's
So,
so uncalled for.
and I'm like, what the, this is BS. And so, if I wanted to be law enforcement in New York State, I would, I don't mind having to go to an academy and learning the rules and regulations, laws and procedures of New York State, because they're going to be different than what I did
Right.
in the Marine Corps. But to start from zero, and like
Yeah.
you said, biology 101, no, this is ridiculous. And so that
Yeah.
that was one of the things that turned me off. The other thing I saw, today, unfortunately, um, I feel that law enforcement is used more to gain revenue than to serve and protect. And I just couldn't see, going out and filling the coffers of the government that's just going to waste money on programs and things that aren't necessary. And, it's like, not do what I really should be doing, and that's helping people and serving the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a deep sense of from you that that's something that it's cliche, so the looking to the person to your right or to your left, but I get a sense that that's really means a lot to you. That's the most important thing for you. It's not about money. It's not about anything else. It's just like Schwarzenegger says, be useful. And just it's something that really means a lot to you. That's something that 2025 I want to get more involved. I have already contacted my American Legion, because it was like a fast-paced 5, 6 years where I graduated, I got married, my wife got pregnant, COVID hit. I'm in the ER in Queens during COVID. On top of that, had bought a house, second kid, but things are kind of, I have a grip on things now, more of a grip. So that people don't realize the American military at every organization in the world in terms of volunteering, nobody tops the United States Armed Forces. I mean, it is a huge part of what we do.
Well, I
It's
mean,
part
every
of
year we do the combined federal campaign.
yeah,
You know, every charity in the United States that's legitimate asks the military for money, for donations for their charity. And
yep,
then, realizing how much the military did for, charities, the military has now come out with an award, a medal for those that do go out and above, beyond just the combined federal campaign fund and volunteering and doing things in the community.
yeah. Yeah, one of the greatest things I did when I was at Camp Pendleton was a weekend. We were just going downtown San Diego, registering all the homeless veterans into the VA system. And there were a couple of Vietnam vets who were homeless for, I mean, probably from the 80s onward, who were entitled to full benefits, 100%. Didn't know about it, had never been a part of the system. And you talk about 20, 25 years, 30 years, just nothing for them. I was in Italy for a year and a half. My only true Blue Side Command, the clinic. But we volunteered with the orphans there. One of my favorite things to do. It's just amazing to do something like that. Working with the kids in the Philippines, the preschools that the American Legion over in Subic Bay sponsors, and that stuff is just meant so much to me, and it's something that it's really the only thing I have left that I feel like I can be a part of and serve are things like that. And it's also, as an added bonus, you do meet so many veterans like yourself who are involved, and so there is a chance of camaraderie and meeting people like yourself who want to feel useful and have a purpose and to serve the community.
Yeah, like I said, and some of these organizations, a lot of these charities have been started by service members. Like the big one right near me is the Ronald McDonald House. One of the founders was a Marine, and
Yeah.
so that's one of the reasons why I got involved with that one when I first came home.
Yeah, the Ronald McDonald House. I haven't thought about that. I've kind of forgot about that. How long have you been involved with them?
Um, I'm not involved with them as much as I used to be. The woman who ran it retired, so my connection, the person I used to work with and knew me, isn't there, and I haven't made that connection with somebody else there the way that that working relationship that we had. I need to get over there and do more, but it's you know you look at what needs help, what needs working on in the community, and the Ronald McDonald House right now is pretty well off. They just added a whole new building several years ago. They're well staffed, so it's like, okay, should I go work with them, or should I find something else that needs more help? And so that's where I'm at.
Do you keep in contact with a lot of people that you served with? Do you have like a lot of buddies?
I just went to Hawaii,
I saw that. Yeah.
and the reason
Did
I
they
went,
invite you there, or like how
yeah,
did that go? They
yeah.
did. Yeah.
So the MCCS was looking for the mall Santa, to do a Christmas event at the Marine Corps Exchange, and they're in at the beginning of the year, and they're talking about all the events they want to do, and the civilian is talking to the sergeant major, the base sergeant major, and they're like, yeah, we wish we could get Gunny Claus to come out, but he won't come out, and he's like, who, what? And so they showed the sergeant major my picture instead of the original Gunny Claus from South Carolina
Okay.
because they were talking about the one from South Carolina, but they showed my picture, and he goes, "Oh, we can get him here. I know him." And they're like, "We've tried several years. We can't get him." He's like, "Okay, hold on." Picks up his phone and calls me, and I answered the phone. I'm like, "Hey, what's up, Sergeant Major?" He's like, "Hey, what are you doing on December such and such?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What do you need?" "Well, I need you out here." "All right, I'll be there."
That's great.
So that's how
Yeah,
I got out there.
I was in K Bay. I remember that jungle training and everything.
That was my first
Uh,
time in Hawaii. It was really nice.
yeah, yeah. They got. I was in Maui as well. The great beaches over there. It really is like a little oasis. Do you have anything planned in the future, in the near future that you're doing? Anything you're working on?
So like I said, I was just down at West Point for the Army Navy basketball game.
Yeah.
I was able to talk to our local county veterans organization, and they actually got a bus to take veterans down to watch the game, which was really good. Because they otherwise, nobody would go down there, nobody would see the game, um, and so that was good. I'm looking at going once again down to DC for Memorial Day weekend. There used to be an event there called Rolling Thunder, and it's now called Rolling to Remember. Rolling Thunder was to uh, account for the POWs and MIAs from Vietnam. And
Okay.
Rolling Thunder has now been taken over by AMVETS. And on top of that mission, they've added the 22 a day. Um, Being a veteran and being in the medical field, you're probably aware of that the VA claims or is willing to admit that 22 veterans commit suicide a day.
Yes.
And
And
so,
veterans are 72% more likely to commit suicide than people who didn't serve.
yeah. Um, and so, that's one of the things that being who I am, that's something that I feel I can help. In fact, when I was in Hawaii, I was in the exchange, and between one of my duties as being the mall Santa, I was walking around looking at uniform items because I don't get to go to a Marine Corps exchange very often.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if I need something, perfect time to pick something up. And I saw a young Marine, stressed out, trying to figure out something, about his uniform. He needed to buy something. So I stopped and I talked to him for a minute or two. And, you know, for me, it was just interacting with a young Marine.
Yeah.
And so I get back to, my duties, and I'm enjoying the rest of my day. The next day I'm on social media and I get a message from a complete stranger. And at first I was like, I don't know who this is. I'm not even going to look at it. It's probably some kind of spam. And it turns out to be that Marine's uncle. And he found me on social media because his nephew was in the exchange buying a uniform item because he had to go home for a funeral of one of his buddies. And so, I didn't know that, but he goes, "You're talking to him, you're taking the time to talk to him and help him out, you know, really helped him out, really made his day and allowed him to get what he needed done and get out of there, you know, with some sanity."
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you gave him, I experienced that a few times. Yeah. It just feels, you just feel recognized. And he talks to this guy like you who's retired and did his duty and was served honorably, who's just recognizing him as a Marine, a human being, doesn't matter what his rank is, just, hey, you're in the Corps. This is who you are. We're brothers. I'm sure he really appreciated
Yep.
that kind of connection. Oh, I had something. What was I gonna go? Oh man, I just forgot my thought.
That's why you got to have a pen and write those things down.
I know. I don't want to be like this the whole time. Again, I'm like learning.
No, no, no.
I
I
get
mean,
to play too. I believe.
the thing is that's the great thing about being recorded. You could cut that part out where you
Yeah,
stop, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. So, um, two questions. First, I'll lead with what's the thing you miss about the Marine Corps the most, being active duty in the Marine Corps?
oh geez. I mean, there is a
I know
more
it can
there
be broad,
no,
but
there is more of a purpose to your
yeah,
life when you're in the military. You're a part of something bigger. You're everybody's going towards a certain goal. Whether it's this week we got to get this done, or if it's this month, by the end of the month we have to have that done, or even in 5 years we're going to be at this spot.
yeah,
And so that's one of the things that you miss. You know, I've had civilian jobs before and after the Marine Corps, and you go in and it's Groundhog Day,
mm,
and it's like nobody's looking forward. Hey, we need to improve this. We need to get better here. We need to do this or that. It's they show up and even and so often they don't show up.
mhm.
And they don't think that that's an issue, that that's a problem. They don't realize how much stress and how much extra work that they put onto somebody else because they don't show up.
Yeah. Um, it, the military, if you are motivated, it will reward hard work. If you are determined to pick up rank, if you are determined to pick up responsibility and you put in the work, you will get it at some point. It will happen. That's at least my experience for the most part.
Yep.
And that's not a guarantee in the civilian sector. There's a lot of so a lot of reasons people get promoted, and not much of it has nothing to do with how good they are. What's something you don't miss? You had touched upon it, 29 Palms, waiting to go somewhere and then being told to go back. I don't miss taking my rifle out of the armory, lining up at 4 in the morning to be transported somewhere, and we don't leave until 2 p.m. I don't I don't miss days like that. That is like hell on earth. You just, you're just waiting in one spot from 4 in the morning till 2 in the p.m. when you told the transpo was at 8 a.m. Or 5 a.m. I don't miss those days, but what's something you definitely don't miss?
So, I mean, as much as you hate that at the time, it does prepare you for a lot of things that you have to deal with in the civilian world and in the military.
Yeah, it
Um,
does. It does.
and so when people these days are complaining about their Uber was a minute late or 5 minutes
Yeah,
late, or this this food that I got from this restaurant isn't what is on the billboard, what it's not advertised as. I just look at people and I'm like, really? That's your big complaint, is
yeah,
that your Uber is 5 minutes late. You didn't have to walk 20 miles because your transport didn't show up or your transport broke down. You didn't you didn't run out of water because somebody didn't prepare and have enough water for an event. You know,
right.
you're not complaining. You're complaining that the food wasn't what it was supposed to be. You don't understand that in the military, in the Marine Corps, I go to the field and the youngest, newest Marine eats first. And me being
Yeah,
the senior Marine, I eat last. That
yeah,
way, they're the ones who are doing 90% of the work. They're getting food first. They're being taken care of. And if we run out of food, I don't need it as much as they do. And
yeah,
they don't understand how things can really be. And they've never really had to put up with anything hard. And right now it's snowing out, it's cold, and people are complaining, and I'm just like, yeah, go live in a
yeah.
snow cave in the Rockies at Bridgeport. See how you feel.
Yeah, in certain shifts in the ER, people will be complaining about certain things, and I'll say, well, you have sneakers on, you got these
Yeah,
nice pajamas on, right? Got this roof over your head. It's not raining on you. You got coffee at your desk. You know you're going to go on break. It's guaranteed, right? It's like coming up in an hour. You know how bad can it be, right? Uh, or I'll never forget this uh, captain Captain Rabel. He was Slayer of Souls. That was his nickname. And he came back from a deployment, and he told me this story where he took his kids to Disneyland in California, and it was a very busy day. I think he had just gotten back like a day or two before, and he's in Disneyland with his family, and it's every ride you had to wait like 20 or 30 minutes, and everyone else it sucked, but for him, he was just thrilled. He just could not. He was on cloud nine the whole time. He told me he didn't care how long the lines were. He didn't even care if he ever got to the ride. He was just so grateful to be back and to be with his family. And that probably epitomizes what we're talking about. You learn what hard work is. I mean, one thing I learned very early on at Camp Pendleton when I got there is like you can't complain in front of Marines. I remember going to the field, doing sick call I had to wake up at 3:30 in the morning, especially when I lived off base, to get to the field by 4:30 for sick call sometimes. And I was just being, oh, I'm so tired. And I'm some sergeant is like, Doc, all you really need is 6 hours of sleep every 3 days. What are you complaining for? It's like, you just can't complain to a seasoned Marine about anything. And I learned not to. And I learned very quickly, there's a lot of complaints that I had that weren't worth complaining about. And that has stuck with me. And it's actually a very nice way to live when you're not focused on the things that annoy you or the things that you feel like are uncomfortable. You're just focused on what's working
Yeah.
and where you are in that. And you just had this whole other element of just petty squabbles and gossip, or it's not even a part of your life. And I think sometimes that's where veterans kind of come off like dicks, I guess. It's like you're not in tune with this, very human element of, complaining about everything I think sometimes they're, why are you making the best of this situation? Like, what's wrong with you? What's your problem? It's,
Yep.
but is it really that bad? Is it? Because, last time I checked, you're guaranteed to go home at the end of the shift, and you're not going home hungry, and you're not going home hurt. So I don't know. I guess it can look a certain way to some people, but I love it. I find it very helpful to just focus on what's working. And if something's not working well, to just have that, how can I improve it? And of course, that's part of living in the civilian world where you may not be able to improve it, and then you have to make a decision how to go forward from that. But at least you're gonna you'll
Yeah. Really,
you'll own the path that you decide to walk on.
it's really strange that people will complain about something, and I'll be like, okay, how do we make it better? How do we fix it? How do we get, and they're like, what do you mean? I go,
Whoa, slow down there.
you've got a problem. What's the solution? Well,
Yeah,
I don't know.
adapt and overcome, right? That's
And they're like, I don't know. And I go, well, then why are you complaining? Give me a solution so we can fix it. We can make things better. Don't just sit there and complain that, something's wrong or isn't working. Let's make it better. And,
yeah.
they're like, well, that's not my job. That's not, what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, wait a minute. You've got enough time to complain about it. You're upset about it. Let's fix it, and so, but they're not willing to do that. It's like, okay, don't talk to me anymore.
Yeah. I kind of hold on to all the veterans that I work with, and we'll you don't really have to say much. Could be a look, could be a couple of jokes here. I can't say most of the jokes that I remember. I remember in college. So I did 5 years active duty. I was with the School of Infantry West, and I went to a Navy clinic in Italy, and then I deployed with 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, and then I got out. And then I was in nursing school in Philadelphia, and I at that time I thought I was going to go back into the military as a Navy nurse, and I don't know. I felt like as I was losing my medical skills and in nursing school. So I decided, I'm like, time in is time in. I'll do the reserves and then I'll go back in, as a Navy nurse. Never panned out, but uh, so as soon as I entered the reserve unit, which I learned very quickly, reserves is kind of like you're either a reservist and always were, or you were prior active duty and we're going to rely on you to get everything done. And the prior active duty, they kind of stick together. But as soon as I got in, some gunnery, no, not gunnery sergeant. It was a chief. It was a Navy chief. He came to me. He's from 3rd Battalion, 14th Marines Artillery, and he drove an hour. He's like, "Look, I need you. You know how the Marines are. You do your job, and they leave you alone. You want to study for nursing school? Have at it. Just do what you have to do when you're with them, and when you're done, study all you want, right?" Another thing I loved about being a Greenside corpsman, because on the Navy side, it's like, oh, you don't have anything to do? We'll find you something to do. Uh, but with the Marines, it's like, take care of your Marines, and then you're good to go. I had mentioned before, you meet somebody and you're like instantly pals. I got 2 lifelong friends from that little bit of time that I spent in the reserves. Both one guy, one corpsman, deployed 4 times as an active duty, on active duty with the Marine. Well, 3 times with the Marines, one with a SEAL team. This corpsman, like this guy is just incredible. We're lifelong friends. Another friend of mine who is a reservist corpsman there, who's also a police officer. We're lifelong friends. Again, it's just like, the bond is just incredible. I had to stop going to the veteran lounge in college because I would shoot the breeze and not get any studying done. We'd just be talking
Yeah.
just stories, just one story after another, just
Yep.
exchanging tales, and I'm like, I can't get anything done. It feels too good.
Yep.
It feels too good. I wound up rescuing a cat on the streets of Philly and just studying at home so I wouldn't be alone. But I couldn't get anything done. It was too awesome of a lounge. Uh,
Yep.
but um, but yeah, I mean, those are the things I miss the most. Talking to you. Thank you for doing this, Gunny.
Oh,
Uh,
my pleasure.
seeing what you're doing has inspired me. Seeing what you were doing, I'm like, I got to call the American Legion and get this thing going because I want to do it. And
Well, I mean, the thing to think about is I checked once online. I Googled veterans organizations, and I think there's like 500 national veterans organizations along with the American Legion. Something to think about is if that's not the right fit for your Legion, there's
right.
other organizations out there that you could work with that might be a better fit. So
You
don't
have any
just,
any any place in particular to go to, like online or any
well, like I
um
said, I mean, just Google
just Google it. Right.
national veterans organizations,
Yeah.
501c. They'll all come up. The big ones will come up. Look on social media. Whatever it is you're trying to get into. You know, there's equine therapy now. Where they take veterans and they go take care of horses and to help with their PTSD. There's all sorts of
Right.
organizations out there, and just like in the military, the guy who's in charge of your local legion might not see your vision,
Yeah,
but
that's a good point.
in a year or two, there'll be a different guy that's in charge of that legion, and he might think that your idea, your program is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Right.
So, those are things to think about and keep in your wheelhouse.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's important to know. Who knows? It might not be the right fit, and to don't get discouraged. Just keep going out and trying to find a place to belong to. Well, let me think. How do I want to say this? See, I can't do live yet. This table, I have the smallest table. It keeps moving. I need to fix that.
Yeah, so
Uh,
my laptop is on the drawer of my table with an inverted um, tray so that it gets up to a level where it's almost eye level as opposed to me like just hunched over looking down at it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that
yeah.
so that this is in the background.
Yeah, I decided I really don't have any good background, so I was just like, well, let me do this. It's
I mean, it's a good. I like it. The only thing is, I don't like the blue screen because it chops your head a little weird sometimes.
yeah, I noticed that. And your hair kind of goes out there. So you
Yes.
don't want to like look like I have a couple of straggly hairs, but they're gone for the blue screen. It would not work out for you. Your beard would be like a half oval.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
So,
it wouldn't work out. Uh,
and this is the Viking tree of life,
yeah,
Urvasil.
I saw that. That's
And
great.
well, I mean, and if you that's the crazy thing as also one of the things that I do is not just studying military history but history in general. The Vikings, you have Odin, and to gain knowledge, he tied himself to the tree of life. And you
Right.
go to Christianity, and you have the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and that's the same exact thing that Odin did. Is he got knowledge from hanging from a tree?
You So you're an avid reader. I remember here. Were you an avid reader while you were in the Corps, or at least American history you read about?
I would read history. I did a lot when I was a lot younger. My grandmother in the family that adopted me, she was the librarian at our school. So it was one of the things that I was
Oh,
always able to
wow.
do. Is
Forget it. Like that personal family culture. Like my mom was a reporter at one point for a newspaper and big on writing. So I, I would I would write and she would edit. I mean, how could you not get? It's infectious. And then once you get bit by the reading bug, you kind of jarred a memory again. I was at field medical training, and I was an avid reader and I didn't really have a book. So I was at like the PX and it was like they had like like the little turnsicle thing with
yep,
like the little thin books on there. And I was like, oh, let me read this thing. It was by Colonel BP McCoy. And again, I'm 29. I'm at field medical training. I already belong to the School of Infantry, so I know I'm going to go back. I'm going to work in field section. I'm feeling a little bit more familiar with Marines at that point. Like I'm starting to kind of get it and really get hungry and um, really start building that. I was really building a pride about what I was doing. And I read this book by Colonel BP McCoy, and it really changed my perception in a profound way because he was talking about Marines and he was talking about the mindset of a war fighter. And he's like, a Marine is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, but nobody goes into combat zone expecting to die. How did he explain it? I'm probably
you don't
butchering.
have a death wish.
No one has a death wish, right? If it
Yeah,
happens, it happens. But he was talking about what made the warrior mentality so strong, and he summed it up in like it's like two halves to a coin. Half, they have to know that not only when they fire downrange, not only their target, they expect the man to their right and to their left to also hit their targets. So it's sort of like a competency in what you're doing in the act of fighting a war. And he said the other half was expecting that if you go down, you can expect the best possible medical care available in that situation. If somebody can get to you, they will. And if they can stabilize you, they'll do everything they can to stabilize you and to get you out of there, from buddy aid to corpsman aid. And I took that very seriously from that moment on. I realized, I guess that you could say it was empowering. It connected me to the Marine Corps in that way, saying, these guys, you know, they they expect, well, one, they expect me to be able to do what they're doing in terms of, firing down range. But if one of them goes down, it is my job to make sure that there is no doubt in their mind that I won't do everything in my power to save them, and I'm going to do everything in my power to also make everyone competent to help each other. Like I took it very seriously from that point on. I think part of it was like I was, 28, 29, 30, and I wasn't right out of high school, and I did have a grown man's uh, perception of things, and I guess more of a father, more of a father-like figure. I mean, they called me Papa Doc many times. So, I'm like a grandfather. I'm a grandfather at 29 years old. You got combat instructors who seem like they lived 4 lifetimes who are like 25,
Yeah.
26. And here I am I'm a boot at like 29. So, uh, but yeah, so that it's just important to point out like that, it's so much of like there's so much education, so much experience that isn't accounted for in the civilian world. That you're reading, and people were encouraged to read by the Marine instructors at that command, and also just leadership in general. Like when I deployed, to exercise your mind, exercise your body. It's just like it's spiritual, it's physical, it's mental. It's not just a job that you did. Like, when you get out, like like, oh yeah, I used to study that, and I switched it up. Or I used to be a mechanic. It's just like this entire existence. I'm kind of going off in a direction. I'm not really sure where I'm going, but
Well, I mean,
um,
it,
it's
it,
somewhere in that I'm praising the Marines and what they do.
you reminded me of the interview I did on urban valor. You know, I'm doing this interview with you. I've done a couple other ones. I really don't think about the impact it may have outside of you and me,
Yeah,
because it's you and me. We're talking and we're
yeah,
connecting. We're veterans, and we're discussing issues that are important to us as veterans. And but so the urban valor video gets out. It's on YouTube. It goes to Facebook. It goes to Instagram. It goes to TikTok. It goes to all these, social media uh, platforms. And then once again, I get a message from somebody I don't know, a picture I don't recognize, a name I have no clue what it means. And I'm about to just delete it, but I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna look at it, and this has caused me to actually to reply to every message I get on social media, and to thank somebody who follows me on social media, because I
yeah. I do the same thing.
I don't know who they are, all the time. I don't recognize them. And so, I open it up, and it's like, hey, Gunner Sergeant, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then since I had replied, he goes, this is such and such. Do you remember me? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. He was my guide in my first platoon as a drill instructor
Oh
back in
wow.
1999. And I'm just like, wow, this is just blows my mind. And so then he shows me a picture. He retired from the Marine Corps as a major, right? He went in from the enlisted and got commissioned. And
Wow.
I'm like, wow, that's really good. Then
Yeah.
he got out and he did a career in law enforcement, had a second career. And he shows me a picture of, him with his family now. And I'm just blown away by, everything that he's done. And he turns around and goes, this is all because of you. And I'm like, what do you mean, me? And he's like, you taught me this as a recruit. You were a drill instructor. You did this and this. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm a knuckle dragger. I didn't graduate high school. You know, I tried to go back to college. It didn't work. I'm not that kind of guy. Everything that you did is on you. I trained you
Yeah.
to be a Marine. You took
Yeah.
that and you made it your own, and you accomplished what you did because of who you are. I gave you the basics. You expanded on it, as you
Yeah.
should. That's how Marines expect it. I teach you something, you take it, you make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. Um, yeah, especially as a um, instructor, like you touch so many Marines. Uh, who- I served with people who had done that, and now we're deployed together, and then like younger Marines would come up to them like, "Hey, you were my you taught me everything. I was lucky enough to get my FMF pin on deployment by the very had two instructors in A school, both Greenside corpsmen, but by the very instructor who I modeled, who I don't say modeled myself, but who really put that Greenside energy in me, and who I always looked to as the standard. I actually deployed with this guy, and he pinned me with the FMF pin on deployment. It's one of the greatest moments of my life, like looking at this guy eye to eye. You know, three and a half, 4 years later, feeling like, in my own way, surpassing his expectations. And it was such an amazing feeling. And I'm sure you provided that for a lot of people. And this is also, I mean, it's not just the military doesn't own this mindset, but you certainly meet more men and women who they view aging not as like a smooth sailing into maybe some retirement. Like they want to learn new things. They want to acquire new skills. They want to meet new people. They want to be useful. They want to be active. They don't want to lie down. You exude that. It's great to see it. It's always that expression. A fisherman always recognizes another fisherman from afar. But I would like to end this with if you could retell a story that you had on your video. I thought was really profound. You were talking about when you were your mother is a doctor, was it? And you were sitting down with her, and she asked you that question that people don't normally ask you when you were deployed to Iraq. If you had, yeah, I don't even know if you want to say you kind of called
No,
her out on. You
I
know what story I'm talking about?
I know the story, and
Just because it hit home when I heard it, it hit home in a way that
the
I
thing
think
is
people might not see that angle to it. I thought it was really a profound.
the there's a big disconnect um, over that subject, because you have what Hollywood puts out and you have what the military is.
Yeah,
And Hollywood puts out this fake bravado that this is how the military is, and this is what is acceptable to do in the military, and what
like Heartbreak Ridge. Yeah, as much as I like that, movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then there's the reality of it. You're talking to a human being,
yeah,
and there's certain taboo subjects that you shouldn't talk to a human being about
yeah.
unless that person brings that subject up themselves and wants to share it with you. And so, in this situation, my mother was a doctor. She still is a doctor. And I had been home a short time from returning from my combat tour in Iraq, where I was there for a year. And, because of Hollywood and because of the media and the portrayal of veterans who've been to combat all having PTSD and having done certain things in combat, she felt it was acceptable to ask me if I had to engage the enemy and take somebody's life, if I had killed anybody. And, for my mother to ask that, and me knowing how knowledgeable she was and how educated she was, and being a doctor, that she should know that that's not a question that's acceptable to ask somebody.
Yeah.
And so I got upset because she asked me, not because it's an upsetting subject, it's because it's a very personal subject, and I hadn't broached the subject with her first. And I knew it was all because of the media. And
Right.
her being a doctor, you being in the medical field, that uh, one of the one of the problems with medicine is the mistakes that are made, whether they're intentional, unintentional, because of medications not being, somebody doesn't tell a doctor that they're on one medication, or the person doesn't know that they're allergic to something, and they get
Right.
introduced to it. And you know I knew
Yeah.
that a lot of people are injured or killed because of medicine and
I
prescriptions.
think
And
the
so,
third leading cause of death in the United States, I believe, is you
right.
know,
And
happens in
so
the hospital.
I flipped it on her, and I said, have you killed anybody today, the last week, the last year? And she got all offended and she got upset with me for asking that question of her. And I'm like, why do you then think it was acceptable to ask me?
Yeah.
Because the media shows it and that's what you think is acceptable, you know? And so it it's one of the things that has caused a rift between my family and myself is that I'm that blunt and I'm that forward
Yeah.
the other thing then of course is there's still that stigma that everybody who's been to combat has PTSD. And you know, when I was deploying to Iraq, you know, we went with our battalion surgeon, and I'd known him for a couple of years. We come back, and before you come back, you've got to do a questionnaire, and of course, you know,
Yeah.
it's the military, so it's yes, no, fill in the blanks, and it was online.
Yeah.
And you know, I then have to go in and talk to the battalion surgeon as he reviews all my answers. And you know, he gets done, he looks at me, and you know, just like you and I are talking, he goes, "So do you want to see anybody when you get back to Pendleton?" I'm like, "No, I'm good." And he realized I did not understand the seriousness of his question.
Yeah.
And so he stopped and looked at me and goes, "Are you refusing treatment?" And I went, "Whoa, no, 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 I'm not refusing treatment. I didn't realize I needed treatment. So if I need treatment, I'll go see treatment." He's like, "Okay." And I said, I don't I don't understand, you know, why you're asking that though. He goes, "Because of your questionnaires and the answers the way you answered them,
Yeah.
I have to refer you to treatment. I can't override it." And I
Huh.
was like, "Oh, okay." And so then, you know, I get back to Camp Pendleton. I'm with my unit. You know, we're doing our deployment, dedeployment, and getting everything turned over. And I go to see the battalion surgeon, and I get my referral to the medical hospital on Camp Pendleton, and I go into the ward, and I have to fill out this time another questionnaire. This time it's a written questionnaire, but once again,
Yeah.
it's all filling. It's all, you know, bubbles. Yes, no, yes, and it's a couple pages long. I get done, and on the back, it actually has a question: "Is there anything you'd like to add?" And it's a whole page, and I'm like,
Okay.
"Okay, great." And it's you know, it's on the back of it, so you know, I almost missed it, and so I just write in there,
I only know those when you're filling out like for like disability. It's like they give you like a page if you want to explain
yeah,
anything more.
yeah. And so you know, I flipped it over and I wrote, you know, in there, and I said, "I hate effing questionnaires." And in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to see an O3 in the Navy, you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's what my battalion surgeon was. You know, I'm going to go see the equivalent of a Marine captain, you
Yeah.
know, and we're going to be roughly the same age, the same experience. And so, you know, it's not going to be a big deal.
Right.
I go back, I get my appointment, and I come back to the hospital, and I'm walking down the hallway to see my doctor now. And you know, just like anywhere else, the first office is the most junior person, and the last
Right.
office, that corner office, is the
Yeah.
senior
Yeah.
person.
That's true. I forgot about that.
And I walk into a captain's office, the equivalent of a Marine colonel,
Yeah.
and she's in charge of all the
Oh,
psychiatrists.
Navy captain, you're saying? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
all the psychiatrists and all the psychologists in the whole base are
Yeah.
hers. And I'm
Right.
just like, oh great, this is this is not where I want to be.
No.
And you know, she goes through everything, and she she gets done with the written questionnaire, and she's just about to put it down. And as an afterthought, she turns it over and just looks at me and is like, "So, Gunnery Sergeant, what's the problem with the questionnaire?" And I go, you're taking a year of my life out of context. You have no experiences before my time in Iraq. You have
Yeah.
no you don't even have my job on this questionnaire. You don't even know that, you know, I've been a military policeman and I've gone to situations where people have lost their lives, whether it be a car accident, somebody who took their own life, you know, had a training accident where a vehicle, you know, rolled over and somebody lost their life. You
Yeah.
have no idea what I've done in the Marine Corps. And then you have no idea what my life was before I joined the Marine Corps. That both my parents were doctors, that as a kid, I was reading JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine, before I picked
Yeah.
up Life magazine or Time magazine or anything like that. You have no idea. And so that was, the other side of that coin.
And that's somebody in the military. So imagine, well, I don't need to tell you to imagine, for those watching, imagine a civilian who's never even served in the military, in terms of trying to convey any sense of who you are or what you've
Yeah.
done to somebody like that, which is impossible.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, fortunately for me, it's one of the good things that I can do is I go to the VA for my treatment. Albany Medical College is right next to the VA, so they send over residents. So I deal with a lot of new doctors that are learning their skills. They're trying to pick their specialty,
Yeah.
and they were looking at my knees because I have torn the meniscus and I have arthritis and other problems with my knees. And so the first time I did this, the doctor said, why are your knees so bad? And without thinking, I go, I did 20 years in the Marine Corps. And it's just boom. There's
Oh, yeah.
no recollection, no connection, no idea of what I'm talking about.
And just for context, not to cut you off, I remember at Camp Pendleton, one of the things we learned was that, statistically speaking, 1 year. I know in terms of, at least for infantry, but I mean everyone in the Marine Corps, like, is
I know exactly
laboring.
what you're going to say.
You know, for every 1 year, your body age is like 4.
Yeah.
So somebody does, even just 4 years in the Marine Corps. I mean, their bones have aged over 20 years.
Yeah.
It's not I mean, that's one of the things I had to get used to. Was It's incredible how much weight you carry in terms of the packs and the flak jacket and the way you had to tighten it. I mean, I remember just undoing everything. My rib cages are all bruised from all the straps, and your waist is all cut up
And
because you just
that's exactly what I had to explain to the doctor.
in standard issue footwear, by the way.
And so the way I did it, the next time I went in, they asked me why my knees were so bad. I explained to them, because of all that equipment, I was morbidly obese. I used to weigh 400 pounds. And they're looking at me and they're like, there's no way you weighed 400 pounds. And so I'd show them a picture of me with all my combat gear on, my helmet, my flak, my rifle, my
Right.
pack, my ammunition, my water, all of that.
And
I
you
go,
weren't just walking.
yeah. And I go, that's 100 pounds right there.
Yeah.
And then I'll show them a picture with me with my pack on. And I go, and that Winnebago on my back is another 100 pounds. And I moved and functioned like that for 20 years with 200 extra pounds on my body at times.
Right.
And that's when the light went on in their head. Oh, that's why your knees are jacked up. That's why your back is jacked up. That's why everything,
Yeah.
your whole spine, your whole body, all your bones are the way they are. So
Yeah, and that's just a message for those veterans who are going through it. Just continue to educate, continue to have patience, and put that perspective out there. Because what you just did for those, I don't know what they were, doctors, I suppose,
residents.
they residents, they kept that for the rest of their careers, even today. I'm sure no one else has to explain themselves, hopefully, like you had to. So, because some people could have just been like "F you," or like I've seen, is a lot of people just give up. They won't go to the VA, or they won't file their claim. They just get so fed up with it all. Just kind of keep at it. It's worth it. Keep doing what you got to do. Keep trying to educate people on what your experience is like. Gunny Claus, or Bar, as your friends call you, but I'm gonna call you Gunny Claus because that's how I like saying. I like calling to be able to call somebody Gunny again. It makes me feel all warm inside. Gunny, thank you for doing this. Thank you for being part of my podcast. This is something I'm learning a lot about this stuff every day, how to do this. Today was all about veterans, all about military personnel. I really appreciate you coming on. to just shoot the breeze about your experiences, my experiences. I love being able to get to know you, and I hope to keep in touch with you and perhaps do this again.
Sounds good. Maybe I'll see you down in New York City with Marines of New York one of these days.
Yeah, just anything you do, let me know. And if I could be a part of it, I'll do everything I can to be a part of it.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot, Gunny.
Semper Festivus.
Semper Festivus.